Crystal.
Hello.
Hello, hello. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. I feel like I still don't have my perfect laptop location here. Where is that? I'm trying to remember where I put this little laptop table that I was using last year. Let me see if it's in the storage closet right next to me this whole time. While everybody logs in. I don't know where it is. Oh well. Mysterious mysteries. Oh, did I know? Did I use that last time? What did I use last time? I guess I just used my lap. I used my lap for my laptop last time, I guess. Is that how I did it? Boink. Doesn't seem like it. How are you guys doing? I'm gonna use this pillow. Do you guys have this situation too going on where like you move your laptop around 7 different ways? Okay. It is 33. I'm gonna load up my videos on my end. Okay. All right, looks like we are a tiny group today. So I am going to spotlight me. I'm gonna open my chat box. What do I want? Can you guys tell me your favorite video you saw this week in the class? We have a hearty, deep topic discussion this week. If you guys aren't too noisy, there's only 3 of you, so let's unmute if you can. If it's not too noisy where you are, we could have like an actual just discussion. It's crazy. Okay, so I'm going to start share screening. And let's do a little walk through what we are covering this week. This is week 7, and it's an interesting week because, well, it's half totally heavy and half super fun dances. So at least there's a little bit of the good stuff and the bad stuff together, right? So we're in week 7, and we've entered a new category, as I have been calling them, which is to say that this category is going to be about economy. Hold on, I see I don't have all my lights on. And by economy, I mean we're looking at the ways in which dance in America, specifically, we're starting this week talking about the Reconstruction era into the swing era. And we're talking about the ways in which dance and portrayals of Black dance and Black stereotypes became codified in sort of the American taste in terms of both what the popular entertainment was before the Civil War, through the Civil War, after the Civil War, and how those stereotypes of Black dance and Black people live on today in our subconscious and influence what we think of when we think about Black dancing. And also to have you guys think about and wonder about the question of why would Black performers perform stereotypes of themselves, and whether or not that's still happening now. So the heavy part, of course, was this Reconstruction and Minstrelsy. So you'll see, actually, before I jump into the actual material, this category C, since we're starting a new theme, as I call them, the categories, this covers, like, this is an outline of sort of everything we're going to talk about this for the next few modules. So this is the numbers here are a little bit confusing. I know, because this page is still linked with the summer schedule, but you can see that this is week 7, 8, 9. So these numbers don't exactly line up, but all of this stuff is what we're going to cover in the modules that are labeled category C. So I think it's 7, 8, and 9 are all category C. So then if we go on to the next page, so this was a big long page of reading. So this is my summary for you guys about the beginning of this idea of the economy and racial stereotypes and how they fit together. So first of all, I just wanted to touch over the idea of the Reconstruction era to give us some context for where a lot of these, in particular tap dance is what we're talking about in this section, where tap dance was growing at the time. So Reconstruction, for those of you who haven't got through this reading yet, is the time at the end of the Civil War, and it's mostly thought of as going up to about 1890, which was about the last time that the United States government gave a real push towards giving Black people the vote after the Civil War. And you know that it didn't really happen for quite a while, right? So between those times, in 1863 to 1865 is like when the Civil War is ending and we're starting to have drawdowns between the North and the South. And a lot of those have to do with legal movements to abolish slavery and to get slavery abolished and to get those laws passed and new state constitutions put into place with more rights for Black people. Generally, they couldn't get the vote to pass, or wouldn't get the vote to pass, with the Southern states could not pass constitutions where they were both abolishing slavery and giving Black men the right to vote. Forget about Black women, because, you know, women in general, we still don't get the right to vote for another until 1919. So at this time, there's a lot of both really negative things happening politically, like the Black codes are happening in response to the pressure from the North to try and make things right after the Civil War. So during Reconstruction era time, part of the agreement when we made peace after the Civil War was that Northern troops spent an extra like 15 years stationed in the South, basically preventing the South from putting slavery back into effect. But it was with mixed results. And that's where the idea of the Black Codes came in. So the Black Codes are laws that were enacted by Southern states to basically wink, wink, nudge, nudge slavery back into effect. So for example, one of the Black Codes that is essentially slavery is that they would often make a law that Black people in their state were not allowed to be unemployed. So you had to be under contract with someone. What? So if you were a Black person and you were on the side of the street, a policeman in the South in the 1860s, 1870s could come up to you, demand proof of your employment, ask why you had any free time at all for yourself. And if you couldn't prove that you were employed, well, then they had the right to make you work. And what do we call that? We call that slavery. So that's how intense the Black Codes were. And at this time, there was also tons of lynching going on. And all of this horror continued until about, by the time the early teens happened, which we think of the Great Migration as the time when lots and lots and lots of Black people just moved out of the South, because up until that point, 90% of African Americans lived in the South. They weren't spread evenly all across the country. So it was about 1919 that the Great Migration happened, when Black people really like en masse just said, screw this, we're tired of being lynched, we're tired of being treated this way, and got out of Dodge. So up until that time in the South, it was very mixed in terms of the success that was happening with the Northern troops maintaining peace in the South and trying to keep it from actually being slavery, and the Black states pushing back. And essentially the reason why Reconstruction, which did have lots of positive affects, which we'll talk to next, the reason why it didn't stick so well is because there was a contested election, which, you know, now we know all about contested elections lately. There was a contested election. And so in order to make peace with the contested election, it's so funny because I don't know if you saw that in the writing, there's like when they write about that election in 1877, where there was more popular vote than electoral vote. And this blew everybody's mind. That sound familiar? In order to make peace with that contradiction in voting scores, what they did was they agreed to give to remove the Northern troops from the South at that time, as a compromise. And at that point, then we end up going into Jim Crow era. So those are sort of the dark parts about Reconstruction, but there were actually a lot of really positive movements during the time of Reconstruction that looked really hopeful. And if it hadn't been for that compromise that the federal government made, pulling all the troops out, there was a lot of hope that Reconstruction might have actually worked and stuck as it's thought of. For example, there were hundreds of Black men who were starting to hold political office. They were in local senates and state senates. This is the time of Frederick Douglass at the beginning of Reconstruction, going and giving speeches on getting the Black man the power of voting. We did have the abolishment of slavery, at least technically, in the 1860s. And we started to have more integration across the board, especially in the northern states. So even though things were getting better, remember that it's not just slavery, unslavery, if that's even a word. What we have is this giant gray area that it's important to look at the details of, because I think that's sometimes a way that our culture has brushed racism under the rug, like, oh, we abolished slavery, but it's not that simple, right? So in the North, while there were lots of people who were totally pro quote unquote equal rights, and this continues on for the next 200 years, there were still things going on like segregation of neighborhoods and segregation. While we didn't have whites only theaters, blacks only theaters like we did in the South, in the North, we still had white neighborhoods where social pressure was used to keep people from integrating. And as we know now, that redlining of like the federal government not giving loans to Black people to buy houses in quote unquote white neighborhoods, for example, kept wealth from getting equally distributed. Even when people were working their buns off and making the money that they should have been making, we had institutional racism which denied people the possibility of equal opportunity and equal income, right? So like if you, for example, can buy one of two houses, and let's say both of the houses are essentially the same price, but one house is in a nice neighborhood and the other house is in a not nice neighborhood, which is often code for a racist sentiment, right? The house that is in the neighborhood that is the white neighborhood at the time, or the nicer neighborhood, is going to increase in value much faster than the house that is in the less valued neighborhood. And so by denying that Black family a loan to purchase the house that will increase in value and only giving them a loan to purchase the house that will not increase in value, then 20 years later, how much money did the federal government deny that Black family when they could have been paying the same payments on the loan as a white family? Which family is going to end up with more equity and more money 20 years from now? That's one of the big questions about like what happened after we abolished slavery and how was that institutionally and economically unfair. So let's roll it back. Are we alive over there? So what we're going to talk about here is when slavery starts to end and Black performers finally get to start performing. Remember, previous to this, we had such segregation that you often couldn't even have a Black performer on a stage in front of white people. So if you look at if you've ever seen or heard of the musical Showboat, that's about that. This boat is going along. There's this amazing performer on the boat. Everybody loves it and it loves her as an actress and singer. And it turns out that she's a mixed race and she's married to a white man. And in order to protect her from when they get stopped in the South and somebody recognizes her, in order to protect her from going to jail and being beaten, he pretends to be Black. But then when he pretends to be Black, both of them are no longer allowed to perform with that touring company because they are now Black people performing for a white audience, and so they have to leave. So that's where we start at the end of Civil War. And then during Reconstruction, we start to have Black people coming on to stages in front of white audiences, but the white audiences have been watching white minstrelsy for the past 100 years. So the thing that the white audiences are asking for and seeking are stereotypes of what they think Black comedy and Black dance is. And so if you were a talented Black person, especially coming from the South, which 90% of the population was, the only way to get onto stage, to have an audience want to see you sight unseen, because remember, you can't become Insta famous. You have to it's only word of mouth. It's only face-to-face performances at this time. Basically, their one choice was to try to deal with that double-edged sword of playing to the stereotypes that the audience wanted. Does that kind of make sense? Can I leave a little gap here for anybody to ask me to clarify? Because that was a lot. Crystal's got a thumbs up. Anybody else here?
Wait, so it's just kind of like pick your poison kind of thing. Like when they had the opportunity to perform, the only way to get known and to satisfy the audience was to kind of play to their just perform those racist stereotypes so that they would be happy. I mean, even though it made you miserable, it was racist, but it was the only way to get known. Is that kind of the main idea?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and there's a huge disparity, right, between the Black audiences and the white audiences in terms of who has the money to pay to see entertainment. So we don't have video, I even said video, we don't even have film yet. movies and film, even those little black and white clips that we've been seeing, that doesn't start until about 1915. So at this time, which is, we're talking 1800s, when is the phonograph? I want to say maybe there might be records coming out during Reconstruction. I think that's the technology age we're talking about. It's 1860s, I should learn that. So in general, like what you have to spread notoriety in this time is sheet music, traveling shows, paper posters, which are, there's printing presses, right? But there's no digital, there's photography, but there's not a lot of printing press photography. It's usually like line drawings and stuff like that. And then type. So you can't build your brand in the same way that we can now. And these people, they could choose to do just the same authentic dancing that they're doing at home with their home audiences. And you could tour a black circuit, which became, well, we talked about that a little bit last week, so I won't go into it, but like there is a black touring circuit where you can go to black audience theaters and make money that way. And that's where a lot of blues and jazz arrived, and also like lots of tap dancing evolved there. But if you wanted to really make more money, then you need to go where there are really higher ticket prices and tour, the rest of the country. If only 10% of African American people or African people in general are still based in the South, and you want to tour the rest of the country, then most of those audiences are going to be white audiences, right? Does that make sense? It's so weird on Zoom how you like ask a question, then you like wait for people to unpause, unmute. Yes, or to give me a thumbs up, thank you. So this segment here, we have this beautiful timeline, yay, which has, I'm just hoping you like scan down the whole thing to get a gist. You don't have to click through except for what sets you curious. It's pretty epic and exciting in here, actually. Pardon me. But then I am hoping that you're going to peer in here. So let's tap into these resources real quick. And this is definitely the section, you guys, where it gets emotionally hard to watch. So I just want to give people permission to pause and tap out. But if you're really having trouble with this section, I really want you to please write to me and talk with me about it, because I'd love to hear how I can do a better job of presenting this hard to watch stuff. Okay, so here we go. Jumping right in, she said. So this is the, this article is linked to earlier on the page up here. And I just added the PDF of this page because I noticed it has like a little blocker on the way here. So this article is just a brief rundown of the history. It's like a one-page read, so that's good to know about how Reconstruction happened. And then there's a couple, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 articles here in this section where we're talking about blackface and blackface stereotypes. So I'm going to click through to we're talking about branding. I'm going to click through to some really super racist imagery coming up next. And the reason why we're looking at this is because what I want for us to be able to gain by examining these racist stereotypes is a sense of, especially for those of us who haven't had them thrown in our face our whole lives, AKA people of privilege, what is important for people of privilege to know about identifying these stereotypes is to see how we force them on other people, or to see how they are played with and flipped around by Black artists throughout time. So last week we talked about the Africanist elements, and one of the things we talked about was high contrast juxtaposition. And one of the things about high contrast juxtaposition is the idea of parody, right? And just we talked briefly last week about the idea of the cakewalk and how Black dancers were making fun of white dancers, or making fun of white uppity people, but at the same time, the white audiences, because they didn't believe that Black people were fully human, assumed that this goofy dance was Black people doing the best that they could do to act refined, when in actuality it was the Black dancers making fun of the snobbery and uppityness of the white people who were oppressing them. And so if we didn't know visually what a snobby Victorian person looked like, then when we watch the cake dance, we might not get that joke. And so when we're looking at these Blackface stereotypes, that's what we're gleaning from taking a look at these images. Is I want us to be able to identify the stereotypes so that we know what it is that's being made fun of in both directions. So we talked a little bit about Jim Crow last week, who is the character that Rice made from stealing that Black man's clothes to wear on stage and also stealing his dance moves. So he's usually quite quick dancer. He's usually comedic, goofy, oversized shoes. So this is an element of like vaudeville clowning that we see on the torn up clothes of the working man. And then Zip Coon is a stereotype that's essentially supposed to be the Black dandy. So if you think about in the 1970s or in the 90s making fun of the 70s, when you think about a stereotypical Black pimp, quote unquote, in like, giant purple lapels with leopard print and the giant crown hat, that is also a more modern version of the Zip Coon character. So the Zip Coon character is super high dressed, super suave, usually extremely sexualized in one form or another. So he's usually like coming on to women. And the interesting thing about Zip Coon is that he also, like in the cakewalk conversation, he's also making a Black man making fun of super high fashion rich white people at that time. So that was one of the ways where this stereotype works in two directions in art. And sometimes you can see them kind of merge together. Mammy, this is absolutely an Aunt Jemima image right here, right? This is a earthy woman. She's usually a nanny or a cook. Uncle Tom is usually like the sort of grandfather character who's often playing music. He's usually gentle and warm. We don't see very much of Buck, but this is an interesting one. We're going to come a lot back to the wench Jezebel idea, especially when we start talking about feminism later on. So in the era of white minstrelsy, we also didn't really have very many women on stage at that time. So just as in Shakespearean times, usually these characters of the wench or Jezebel character were also played by men. So talk about stereotype flipping there. You have a white man in blackface playing a woman, if you can imagine. And often they would do things that had this sexual multiple signification, like instead of making their cork lips big like they normally did, they would make them extra big and extra red in order to signify both this feral gnashing teeth and also women's genitals. Like super freaky, weird stuff is going on here in this wench Jezebel idea. The mulatto character is the mixed blood female, and she's often tragic because she often passes for a while and then doesn't pass for a while, and both of those things have their own tragedies. Pickaninnies are the stereotype of small children with big eyes, and the name Pickaninny wasn't always, well, it came from these young dancing children. So when we talk about the amazing and inspiring Whitman sisters next week, we're going to talk about they like took a bunch of children on tour, and those were called pickaninnies. And it didn't have quite the same, like the name pickaninny didn't have quite the same negative idea as wench, for example, at the time, but still tons of stereotypes, right? So those are the big top ones. And we're going to talk a lot about wench, mammy, zip coon, and Jim Crow, and how do these happen. So the blackface on Broadway, I mean, where do we even start with this? So at this time, when we're starting to have Black performers come in front of white audiences, there had already been white minstrels doing blackface and doing minstrelsy on Broadway. And when we started to have Black performers coming onto those big stages, and when I'm talking about big stages, as in the big theaters that were on Broadway in New York City, that's really when we use the term vaudeville, even though vaudeville still had stages around the world, as opposed to sort of those traveling circusy caravan era that was pre-vaudeville. At this time, there was often a one colored rule, as it was called, which meant that you could really only have one Black performer on stage at a time in a show. And so that was another reason why there was so much power over what the content of these Black performers did was. So if you were, let's say you made it famous touring in front of Black audiences and you were about to make it to the next level, which is to say bigger theaters, which is to say that then you have to be playing to these big theaters that are owned by white people that have white audiences who have more money to spare. Then there would be like say you'd been in a show with 20 Black performers touring the nation doing really well. But then if you want to get to this next level of audience size, there might be 20 people on that stage, but only one of them is allowed to be Black. So out of those 20 people, you're weaning just the one performer. And then that one performer becomes, definitely the minority in this show. And this show gets to tell you like what you're going to do on that stage. I forgot about that. All right. So this is our reading for last page. Oh gosh, so terrible. I think also, yes, this is we don't go into a lot of these, but there are plenty more stereotypes in the country here. All right, so this is the Smithsonian reading that's at the bottom of this page, right? This one. So do make sure that you get through this one. It's got lots of painful imagery again, but this one is written by the Smithsonian. It has some just amazing imagery also. Yeah. So do you guys have any questions about any of this reading or any, I guess this is not the reading ones. That's great. So this one's just imagery, which is easier to get through. Questions about that? Anything at all? We good? Yay! All right. Did we watch this yet? Because I'd like to. Now that we've covered sort of what's going on in history in this time, I'd like to move into the fun dancey part. Yay! And I have prepared a try it out dance activity for you for this week. So I'm just going to open it up now. I was kind of waiting to see if I could find some tap super beginning, like just teach you one step videos with more African-American instructors. And I did the best I could, but I'm going to keep looking for something better. So I will release that. It'll be listed under this week's module 7, but you're going to have a couple weeks to do it again. So I just wanted to talk to you about tap shoes. Yay! So these are obviously very modern tap shoes. and I consider myself a beginning tap dancer, so I think I'm really excited about this. Try it out because I think it's super fun. But one of the things that we do in tap dance is we use shoes that make noise, right? So you can see how a tap is at the very tip of the toe, and then there's a segment to stand on that's where the ball of your foot goes. Yeah, and then there's usually a heel or a small heel, and then a big tap on the back. And the interesting thing about tap shoes is that they make different sounds in different places depending on where you are putting your weight. And so as you're tapping, you can put the whole foot down at once, which makes one sound. You can put your weight just on the ball of your foot, which makes another sound. And you can also like tap just the front tap or tap just the back tap. So in the tap dancing try it out videos, obviously you guys probably don't have tap shoes. That's my assumption, is that no one has tap shoes, but what you want to wear to try it out is a shoe that looks generally kind of like a dress shoe, like a men's dress shoe, or just anything that's just flat on the bottom, even if it doesn't have tap. So initially there were no taps on tap shoes. They were just people's normal shoes. And people would tap on pieces of wood. People would tap on this is an evolution of, well, okay, let me let this video speak for us. How about that? But when you try it out, you want something that's sort of a
Hi, I'm Karen Birthright.
I'm Gary Coleman. I'm Jason Aramis.
And we are cast members of Paradise Square the Musical here at Berkeley Rep. This is a little tidbit of how we and the creative team thought that 150 years ago, African American and Irish American rhythms melted together in the 5 points. We're running here till March 3rd, so get your tickets now and come see us. You guys want to give me a beat real quick?
years. You guys, I'm so sad that you can't see this musical. Oh, so last week we talked about some of the community dances, especially dance steps that were social dances in Africa from African communities came across the Middle Passage to America, and how those began to evolve. And we looked at how there's a couple of videos, like the social dance in America, Black social dance video that was a TED Talk that's in last week's viewing, that shows how some of the buck and wing dances turned into things like the Tootsie Roll and the Kid and Play and the Charleston, right? So this video that we just saw is from the performers of Paradise Square, which is a musical that was playing at Berkeley Rep 2 years ago, and it was on its way to Broadway. Like, they had closed in Berkeley, they were going and starting to do rehearsals and rebuild the show to open on Broadway, and then 2020 hit, and it's just heartbreaking. But one of the things that's amazing about it is that Jason Aramis, his company does tap mixed with hip hop. And so he's one of the co-choreographers. The woman in the center there, she brought in the elements of African-American dance. And there's also Bill T. Jones, who's an extremely famous contemporary modern dance choreographer. So there's essentially like 3 strains of choreography coming together to make the choreography for this show, which was about this era. So it's Reconstruction Era in New York City. And there was a neighborhood called the 5 Points, and this part is factual, where in the 5 Points, there was full integration, including intermarriage. And it was like this moment of really hope, and how it fell apart because of the economy at the time. So that, I wish I could show it to you, but one of the amazing things about it is that they really developed the characters using dance. And one of the characters in the play is essentially Master Juba, who's escaped from the South. And so he is a performer of buck and wing dances and patent Juba, which you saw reference to earlier. and how, and so in the play, and this part is the historical fiction part, he is having dance-offs with these Irish step dancers. So Jason Remus in this video, he's like a world champion Irish dancer, even though he's from Australia, I think. But so those two choreographies in this excerpt, it talks about how those two dance styles start to merge together to create tap dance. So, wait, wrong window. So, and this is a photo from the actual musical with the Master Juba character and Jason Remus dancing. So they're like having a dance off in order to make money here in this. And then you see at the beginning of the musical, you see that his dancing is very much straight tap or Irish step dancing, and his is very much the like downward stomping and the body percussion, and they start to merge together, and that merge together is what tap dance starts looking like. And tap dance itself, from the hoofing, which is where you have the percussion of the shoes on the ground, eventually molds itself all the way until what we would consider essentially turfing today, where you're doing fancy footwork, you're shuffling against the ground. And so when you think about turfing now, we have that extremely smooth, upright upper body, which if you think about, for example, Michael Jackson doing the moonwalk, like his upper body is super smooth while his feet are pretending to do the moonwalk backwards. And he does all these little swivels in and out wings of the knees, but his upper body was really still and controlled. And that still and controlled upper body comes from the Irish step dance and jig tradition, whereas the swinging part of the body that we see in tap dancing during the 1920s comes from the wing dances. What else do I need to make sure? Okay, and then this Appalachian clog dancing section kind of gives you an idea of what more of the European influence into tap was, and you get to see all of these, because there's also hoofing, clog dancing are versions of tap dancing that were intermingled at the time, and they eventually stayed, like the terms clogging and hoofing mostly stayed with the white communities who were very isolated in Appalachia. But it's important to remember that during Reconstruction and early in these times, there was often, especially in big cities, intermingling of races at this time, because anyone who was a working class person who came to the city was ending up living together in these tenements. And that's part of the setup for the Paradise Square movie, is that you had these different populations intermingling at the time, and that created a hybrid dance. So if you remember the first week, we read that article that talked about the difference between fusion dance versus hybrid dance. So hybrid dance meaning that you had two people from different backgrounds, different dance backgrounds, who end up training together and whose dances merge together, as opposed to a dance fusion where you have someone who takes elements from one dance and puts it into their own dance, and it's kind of choreographed together. So tap dancing is much more of a hybrid dance. So loads of elements from the African American community dance traditions, but also some elements from the Irish step dance traditions and the Scottish ones. Does that help? Let's see if we can pull out one little clippy here. Which is the best? Well, let's look at the old one, shall we? Oh, here's our buck dancing. And you can see those shoes do not have taps on them. Those are just leather-soled shoes, but he's doing lots of fancy footwork. We have a flip. He's playing the harmonica. We're patting hands. We're stomping our feet. Yes. There's all those elements. And then this is on the other side. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit and pick a random spot. So some of the original noises that happened. I didn't go back far enough. Some of the original noises on shoes that happened would be because people would just put nails into the soles of those leather shoes. So taps, as we know them now, are a kind of a later creation. But you can see in both of these examples here how the upper body is relatively still, but there is sort of an up and down jumping motion. I'm going to leave you to examine all of that. So this one's interesting because you can see that one of them does flat footing and another one does clogging. And then let's talk about the all fabulous Bill Bojangles. So Bill is important largely because he broke the Blackface ceiling, and he's such a complicated example of what Black performers had to face. So he was an incredibly talented dancer. He was, let me see if I can find a background of him. Oh, since we're talking about before taps, let me just turn this down. So he was such an incredible dancer, and he originally performed with a partner. And so one of the first ways that he broke the ceiling and started changing the rules about what Black performers were allowed to do is that he worked with a performer, so therefore two Black people on stage. And one of the things that people both love and hate about Bojangles is that he did perform in blackface sometimes. And so people sometimes resented him for making that choice. And yet, on the other hand, he was constantly pushing the edge of what was socially acceptable in terms of where a Black man could perform. And so I think it's important to remember that Bojangles accepted some of the stereotypes that were forced upon him because he saw them as a way to sort of squiggle into the cracks of racist rules. And then once he was on stage, and he was such an incredible performer that the whole white audiences would be so amazed and want to see him again, that then he could maybe bring someone else on stage with him, or hire another band, or get that white audience to come to another show that's full of Black performers. Old school beatboxing here, people. Okay, so I'm going to skip forward to the sand dance part. So here we don't have taps on Bojangles' shoes. He is instead using leather shoes and performing on sand on a hard floor. So that's what that sound is. So Bojangles was also one of the first people to take tap out of that really downward, heavy stomping buck dance style, and to add in that really uplifted, sort of elegant, light on his feet part to the tapping. And that definitely fits in with this idea that we have of the time of Reconstruction and into the Jazz Era and the Harlem Renaissance eventually, is this idea where the performers had been performing buck dances and tapping. And of course, obviously, he's been doing tapping for so much time. It's not like he just showed up and one day was a good tap dancer, right? But while he was performing for Black audiences, the white audiences were still watching these old stereotypes of like heavy, downward, rougher dancing. And so Bojangles' approach to tap dancing being very upright and elegant not only lets him present while playing with that idea of the stereotype tap dance, but making it more elegant. And so like opening the audience's eyes to the idea that maybe the Black people aren't just workers who are down on the ground, earthy, to use a metaphor for the movement, but that also they might be elegant, upright people. I'm gonna just turn this on for a hot second here. So Bojangles built this staircase specifically for this choreography that he created that is one of the most famous tap moments ever. And actually each step has a different pitch. So when he would perform it, it would make a different noise depending on which step he was on. And then this is probably his most generally famous moment. And it's famous for a couple of reasons. Obviously, Shirley Temple is incredibly famous, right? So these are two super stars. But what's interesting to note about this film is once again that like dichotomies of stereotypes. Right, so let me just pause for a second, then we'll watch a little more because this is a great place to talk. We have Bojangles in a very nice suit, right? So when we started out here, we were looking at one of his earlier films, and he is a field worker, right, on a boat, but he's still like dressed really roughly. And here in Little Colonel, he's in a suit, but he's a butler. Right, so he's still in a place of servitude in comparison to this privileged little the white girl. However, it was unheard of. In fact, might be the first time that you have here on film a white actor and a Black actor in the same scene interacting. And on top of that, right, so he agreed to play a servant in film. So on one hand, people were like, what are you doing, Bojangles? You're like the most famous Black man in America right now. Why would you want to play a butler? That's such a stereotype. But on the other hand, he's breaking the glass ceiling of an interracial couple here. And they're friends. It's not just like he's tapping up the stairs to get her a glass of water. They're actually trading dance steps together and making friendship. And by the end, they like hold hands, which was not allowed at the time. And you would get lynched for that in places in the South at the time. So that's what makes this so incredible, not to mention the astounding tap. Let's enjoy it.
Do that too. All right. Are you ready? Yep. Come on. Say, you catch on quick. Look out there. Here is the answer. What's going on around
here? Adorable. Tiny girl tap dancing. All right, so plenty more fun taps to watch. This one's a lovely moment. It's got Gregory Hines. So we're gonna, down here toward the end, we're gonna talk about tap in the 1920s, and then we get to tap in the 20th century, and all the way down to a turfing example. So before we go, let's chat a little bit. I'm looking at your chats. Vintage vibes. Okay, so last week we talked about the Africanist elements, and I want to pull up another video to, what are we at? Well, maybe we can't. Can we? Got time for one more video? It's pretty awesome. So I want you to think about, and actually, can you unmute for a moment? I'm gonna dig up a video. Can you unmute for a moment, and can I have you guys just try and identify, in that last video we saw, some of the Africanist elements that you see in that video. So there's the aesthetic of cool, there's high effect juxtaposition, there's polycentrism, polyrhythm, there's ephebism, and I swear it's so hard to remember all of them at once, right? It's the first one. You guys tell me. Anybody at all, no wrong answers. This is just a how are we looking at the dance question.
Definitely aesthetic of cool, because he has like this light expression while doing all that, like presumably really like exhausting kind of movement and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? There's no wrong answers here, guys. So just like, let's guess together. All right. Okay, I'm gonna bring up a new video. I love this because it's got so many of those elements to, as we say, unpack. So this is Stomp. This is a tap group that began, I believe, 1990s. Is that right? So what do we have here? We were talking last week about the difference between quote unquote white Eurocentric coolness versus the African aesthetic of cool. So we have this first dude. He's doing his own thing. He's tapping his pen in his mouth and reading a newspaper. Second dude comes in. He's got no idea how much space he's taking up, right? He's just like up in that first guy's grill. Lol, pre-COVID. Is he sunbathing? Excellent. So notice how the first character wants to control the polyrhythm and polycentrism that's going on with that character who's beatboxing, right? So he's making one rhythm with his mouth. She's making one with her newspaper against her thigh. And even the first character was making a third rhythm or a second rhythm with his shushing. And he, the white guy, right, is having a really hard time being cool with the chaos. Which was part of what we talked about last week in terms of the white aesthetic of cool being like, keep it together, do what you're supposed to do, versus the African aesthetic of cool being finding peace within some chaos. And then if we're going to talk about one of the stereotypes that wasn't on that page that's kind of implied in the Zip Coon stereotype is the okay, I just want to watch this forever. So let me pause right there and just finish the last sentence, and then we can just watch this on the way out and make any comments that you like. But the other character that is not so much a stereotype, but that's an actual like folk character from African tradition and African diasporic tradition is the character of the Trickster, also known as a Papalegba. So, and this Trickster character can be an expression of a spiritual or mystical element coming in. So also sort of like the idea of Loki in Viking mythology, but this character who comes in and just stirs up a bit of chaos and fun. And so we can see elements of that in the performer on our left here, who is definitely demonstrating high contrast juxtaposition. So for example, he just randomly rips the newspaper in half and turns it into a dinosaur, and then starts laughing so hard that he coughs and starts coughing and pats himself on the back, and then turns his newspaper into an asthma inhaler. And none of those things have any reason to be in the same piece of art at all, except that they're funny in contrast, right? And so that is definitely an Africanist element as per Brenda Dixon Gothschild. We definitely have polycentrist polyrhythm. We have the ephebism of the way he's like flexing and full of energy in what should be you know, a serious newspaper reading. Well, the white guy thought it was going to be a serious newspaper reading hangout. And then there's also just the fun of digging into watching this and finding more examples. So if you see more examples of Africanist elements playing out here, which isn't to say that these choreographers thought about that in the first place. That's not the idea besides digging into a piece, behind digging into a piece of dance. So I think that's really important for me to say here. When I talk about digging into a piece of dance or choreography and analyzing it or looking at it, it doesn't mean necessarily that we believe that the choreographers behind this piece had taken this class and were thinking about all of these things before they made this piece of art. That's not what you're trying to say. So I think sometimes we feel scared to assume the intentions of the creator of a piece of art. But when we're looking at art and thinking about sort of the cultural subconscious influences, that's more what I want you to think about when you look at art and start to try and pick apart elements. And the reason we pick apart elements is not so much about being judgmental, but more because it gives us a way to connect to the legacy of where different influences, different types of dance, and different cultural tropes can come in to bring us to where we are today. And so that's really the idea behind academia and dance in terms of analysis, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna let this play because it's awesome. But do you guys see anything else that you want to mention on our way out? Do you have a meeting at now? Okay. I'm gonna let this go. And I'm gonna take this baby.
You can show off. Baby.
Here's the baby. Here's a euphemism for you. Yeah. Yay! All right, guys. Any closing comments you guys want to add in on our way out? Luna says hi. Whoop. Anything else? Any other questions? I agree, Allison. That guy's so hot. He's awesome, isn't he? Oh, are we talking about this girl? This is Luna. Do you guys have any more questions about this week's reading or the videos we're watching, or how are you feeling about doing a tap class? The idea is mostly to give you an idea of what it feels like to move in shoes. Anything else? Speak to me, people. Speak to me so we can check out. Speak or chat. I know, babies are distracting. You think they have no more questions? No more questions? Okay. All right, cool. I see some text here. All right, guys, check in with me however you like this week. And I will see you next week. I'm going to post your tap lesson now. I'm just posting it to this week because I wanted to stick with the most of the tap stuff. But you have a couple of weeks to get it finished, and I'd love to hear what you think. Okay? All right. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you. Say bye, Luna. Bye-bye.
Hey, Professor, I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. I don't know if you have to go somewhere.
As long as you don't mind company.
It's actually regarding the quiz from last week.
Okay.
Actually, one about that and one more technical, but I figured I'd ask this first.
Sure.
Hold on, let me see if I could try to, or I don't know if you happen to have it with you. It's regarding one of the questions about polyrhythmic versus polycentric. I think it's not really focused on the question. It's because I mean the main question I have with that is like, because I always thought, if I'm going to be quite honest, I don't think I'm able to discern the difference, because I have a general idea what polyrhythmic is. It's like making multiple rhythms, you know?
Yeah, like in that video we just watched, there was the shh, shh, shh versus the, what do I have here to make noise with?
Yeah, with
What is this?
yeah, one of the performers made a beat with like their mouth, and the other with a newspaper. Those are two separate beats going alongside each other. So I can understand that, and that being polyrhythmic.
Yes. So
And
what's polycentric?
yeah, I think because I remember you described it before. Wait, so
You might think about that meaning different parts of the body. So like if your head's going and your hand's going at two different rhythms, that would be polycentric. There's movement happening in my wrist right now, and there's movement happening in my head. So that's polycentric.
So does polycentric refer to like the body, and polyrhythmic like sound?
I think that's a pretty good way to think about it. Of course, the body can be making the sound.
Yeah, that's like oh, I see, like with body percussion and stuff.
Yeah, and that's where they overlap. But polycentric
Oh,
generally meaning different parts of the body initiating of a rhythm, and polyrhythm being different rhythms. So like you could have 4 on the floor at the same time.
so I think so. Wait, so like a person, I can't really, how should I describe it? Because you see like street performers where like, I don't know if I'm doing a great job of describing it, but I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Like you'll go to like the city, and then there's street performers, and there's like some street performers that'll have like stale torso, but their legs will be moving really, really fast. Would that be an example of polycentric?
It can be, except polycentric usually means more than 2. So like you have a still torso and then really fast legs, but then maybe also a hand
Fast head.
doing a different thing, right?
Oh,
so
like your
you had super fast legs at the bottom and a slow hand. Polycentrism means more than one spot at a time in your body.
Oh, and then polyrhythmic is if I were to like make a sound with like with my mouth, and then I would have like a different rhythm as I was like tapping my foot up against the ground.
Do you want to just?
So here, let me. Oh, sorry.
If you just clap,
Mm-hmm.
can you do that? Just like nice even clap.
Oh, like
go for it. Clap, please.
like this.
Yes. Yeah. Keep going. Just keep clapping.
Uh-huh.
You're doing a 4 on the floor, 4 count clap. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to put triplets on top of it. So you keep clapping your 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to go.
Oh, so if this was one performance, this would display polyrhythmic.
Yeah. And if you were doing, for example, 4 on the floor with your foot and triplets
My hands.
with your hands, that would be polycentric and polyrhythmic at once.
Because my body is like different parts of my body are like following this different flow and making different noises as well.
Yes.
Oh, but like in a more general sense, polycentric usually refers to multiple body parts following a different flow. And then polyrhythmic is referring to like the noise and the sound.
To the noise and the sound, but specifically the beat of those noise and sound.
Oh, yeah, like the beat. Oh, I see.
Yeah. The rhythm.
So hold on, let me see. Oh my God, there you go. I think I'm starting to get it now. It's the body and like the noise, the sound. Because it says here for question 2, which terms describe the use of different parts of the body? So that's not necessarily polyrhythmic, it's polycentric.
Right. Yes.
And then polyrhythmic is like the beat of the noise.
Yes.
Okay, I think
Or the beat of the accent. Right?
Yeah.
You could be doing a silent beat.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, I think I get it now. Yeah, sorry.
No, that is such a good question. Honestly, Josh, like, please do ask these questions earlier because I am quite sure that they are like I love having them in our lectures. I think they're really helpful.
Yeah, no, but so I think on that note, hold on. So polycentric body and then rhythmic is like the beat or the what? Okay, so I think one last question. I think one last question. Okay, yeah, this is just a more technical one. So I look at the grades for Canvas and stuff like that, and I notice every time the lecture.
Turn on student view and go to the grades thing because it looks grades pages look really different to teachers than they do for you guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So going to grades. All right. Okay.
I think what I'm worried about is so I know that we get points for these lectures and stuff like that, but I notice every time I get points for the lectures, my grade goes down, and I don't happen to know I don't know if I'm
so interesting. I think I know why. Okay, so these discussions, these extra credit discussions are all going in. Hang in there, baby. They're all going in. So I'm going to the assignments page. And remember, there's 2 views here. There's show by date and show by type. So in the show by type view, you'll see the buckets for each category of the grade points. And the discussions go into different buckets, right? So this bucket is our weekly assignments, so like the quizzes. And so half of the discussions go into the final exam bucket and half of the extra credit for the discussions, well, maybe it's not half. And some of them go into the midterm bucket.
Mm-hmm.
So your grade might be looking like it's dropping when I put extra credit in because nobody's taken the midterm yet. So before So this right here is expecting to be, this bucket is worth 100 points. And before I put any extra credit into that, your grade isn't expecting that 100 points of midterm.
Oh, so once we take the midterm, that's when it all kicks in.
Yeah, so like the 5 points right now, when the grade is being averaged on your view, it's probably showing you have 5 points out of 100 on this category.
Because we haven't even taken it yet.
You haven't taken it yet. So that would make sense that it looks confusing, but now you know why.
Because I thought I was like, am I missing an assignment? And like these extra, like these points aren't doing, because I remember taking a course and kind of the same thing was offered, but I didn't realize that I was actually missing assignments. And so that explained why I was like the points I was getting wasn't doing anything. And I didn't know if that was the same case here.
No,
but okay,
but
cool.
It's great that you noticed that and brought it up, because yeah, I think that's why. It's because your grade, most people's grade right now is only averaging the modules and weekly assignments. But if you're getting the extra credit by coming to these live Zooms, then some points are going into the bucket of the midterm exam already.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and so like your full grade, your total grade, does it have it down here? Yeah, your total grade is including some of these things if you're getting extra credit in here. Whereas most people, this would all still be NA because they haven't earned any points by taking the final exam.
Yeah, we haven't even taken it yet.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So no, I should. Okay, actually, hold on. One last. Sorry. So
I'm fine as long as you're okay.
Yeah. So because I think I just came up with an example. Just I want to make sure I can really discern this. So like, let's say I am making a beat with like my mouth, and then like another person is doing like a clicking noise. Like that's just polyrhythmic. That's not polycentric.
And it's not even necessarily polyrhythmic. So I can make a noise with my snap and a noise with my mouth. Do we have original sound off right now? I'm not sure.
Oh, it depends on the beat of.
Yes.
Of the beat. So if it's like.
If one rhythm is in triplets, for example, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the other rhythm is in 4 on the floor. 1, 2, 3, 4. But you can do them together. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1. It's so hard for me to do.
Yeah, no, that's and even describing it too. But like, oh, it's the
hard
beat.
To do with one hand too.
It's the beat of those noises. It's not because like let's just say like another. I was doing like I was snapping one beat, and then the other person was also snapping, but a different beat. That is
that's polyrhythm. It's got to have multiple rhythms and multiple different beats at the same time.
It's not, and it's not even due to the fact that they're doing something different. It's really like, because like I can make a noise with my mouth and like the other performer snap, but we can snap and like I can make noises with my mouth at the same beat, which wouldn't be polyrhythmic. Okay, got it.
Correct.
And then it's polycentric and polyrhythmic if I were to like I guess pat my like belly and like pat my belly and like on one beat, and then the other, or actually here I'll just use me, like I'll pat my belly and then like I'm like stomping my feet at another beat.
Yes, that is both polyrhythmic and polycentric.
Because my body is moving at different rhythms. Like my foot could be like going really, really fast. I could do like a really slow tap or like belly taps, but
yeah.
Okay,
so here's something I can do with one hand. I'm going to bounce this baby on a 4, and I'm going to say triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the baby's rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's polyrhythmic, right? She's on a 4 count. My
actually,
mouth.
I don't know if your camera, because I don't know if you're doing it because I can't.
Because I'm still screen sharing. Okay, here we go. She's on the 4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to do a triplet count with my mouth and noises. So here we go. 2, 3. There's your 4 count.
Mm-hmm.
And then a triplet would be 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So that's polyrhythmic. She's on a 4 count. My mouth is on the 3 count.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily polycentric because not like multiple body parts aren't like moving at a different rhythm. for you.
Right.
Oh, I see.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm polyrhythmic and polycentric.
Wait, how is it polycentric? Because now there you go, polycentric. You're
There we go. I was like, I swear I can do this, but I can't do it and mom at once.
oh, I see. It's but the bass difference is like the beat of like the sound versus like how your body is moving at different is like polyrhythmic, polycentric respectively.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I think I got it. Okay. So I think in that case, yeah, sorry for pestering you.
No, those are really, really good questions.
But I think in that case, I'll have the weekend to kind of digest it all. But in that case, you take care, okay, Professor?
Okay, I'm gonna try and make a little example dance for us to do to learn about this, because I think it's a great activity. Let me challenge myself to make that. She says, not right now.
Okay.
Thank you, Josh, for your great questions. I really, really appreciate them.
So in that case, you take care, okay?
Okay.